and hope you are keeping well. In this video I'm going to show you how I edited this image. I've recently returned from Slovenia, and this is one of the images I made there at the Church of Jamnik. So basically, when I'm flying a drone, obviously this image is quite contrasty. So because the drones and the sensors aren't quite there yet to capture all the highlights and the detail and the shadows, I bracket images. So these images that you're seeing here, this is the image for the shadows, this would be the image for the highlights, and this would be the mid-tone, the mid image. So a bracketed series of 3 images. Most importantly, I make sure I have the highlights. So the first step is to merge those images to HDR. You can do this in Lightroom also. I do it in Capture One. So I just highlight the 3 images. Same process in Camera Raw, or the same process in Lightroom, and I just right click and I merge to HDR. That's going to merge. What I do then when I get the HDR image, I try not to process the file and get everything. So this is the processed image. I have all the details in there, so I try not to work on just the one image. What I tend to do is I make a copy. So we'll right click here and we will clone the variant. So I will make 2 copies and I will then blend those 2 copies together inside in Photoshop. That's how I'm tending to do it now. So I process 1 image for the sky, I process 1 image for the foreground, and blend them together. So I might just reset these now because they already have adjustments, and I want to kind of make my own adjustments. So we'll just reset the 2 of them. Okay, so a nice flat file. We'll add a bit of contrast. So say we process this one for the sky. We're not worried about the foreground. We'll bring down the highlights. Open the shadows just a little bit. Bit of clarity. Again, just processing for the sky. Small bit of saturation. I technically could get everything I want out of this, but the feel I'm looking for me personally, it comes better from me when I blend the 2 together. Bit of highlight, maybe more. Might take down the exposure. I just want that sky to be a bit darker. That's it. Okay, now we'll make the foreground image. We'll take up the brightness, bit of contrast. So take up the brightness. So the brightness is more or less a mid-tone slider. Bit of saturation. Take down the highlights. A bit of clarity. Bit of structure. Up in the shadows. Okay, so that's the one for the foreground, that's the one for the sky. Foreground, sky. Happy with that. Maybe open the shadows slightly in this. Okay, just look at that foreground again. Bit more contrast maybe. No contrast. Bit of saturation. Okay, I think I've done enough there now. So highlight the 2 of them, right click, edit in Photoshop. So two of these will come into Photoshop. So this is the first image, so this is kind of where I ended up. It's not the exact same image, this is a different image, it's the one before it, but it's kind of where we want to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste one on top of the other. So the old-fashioned way is select all, edit, copy, close it down, edit, paste, and then you get one image right on top of the other here. So we have the dark image underneath. Okay, so I actually prefer to have the lighter image underneath, and we just need to open this, and I prefer to have the dark image underneath. Sorry, the dark image on top, brighter image underneath. So we're going to put in a layer mask into that, and I'm going to use the gradient tool to blend them together. I have my gradient set to classic, it's the old way. My gradient tool there. Okay, classic gradient, and we're going to pull from the bottom, set to black, and we're going to blend the brighter foreground into the darker background. So that kind of gives you a look at that. If we hit Alt and click on the mask, there's your kind of graduated mask where one bleeds into the other, nice and soft. So yeah, that's kind of a starting point. So I have it blended together now, and now it's the next thing is to apply some more masks and gradients, so that we end up with something like this. Okay, so we'll flatten that. So where to start? I think this is always, for me, when people ask, you know, how do you edit, what's your workflow, there really isn't a workflow. It's kind of, you know, how I want the image to look, how I feel about the image. Every image is different, so there's no kind of continuous workflow for each image, because I treat them all very differently. So for my concept of this, if we go back and look, so obviously I want to highlight this area, so the whole concept is darkening all around to draw the eye to the church. So we'll give that a go. So what I will do is I tend to do most of my work, a lot of work, what I call it's like fashioning the light, you know, inside in camera raw using gradients. So I use radial gradients, I use linear gradients. So we're going to start off with a radial gradient, and we're going to put a radial gradient in there, and I'm going to follow the slope of this. So with the radial gradient, when you get the mask up like this, that means that the adjustment that you make is happening inside, just like that. But I want the adjustment outside, so we're just going to invert it, and we're going to take down the exposure. Sometimes I take it down a lot, sometimes I tend to take them down marginally. So we're going to take this one down, give it a bit of drama, I think it can take it. Yeah. Taking it down by nearly a stop. Now we'll make another one, a radial gradient, and we'll make one inside again. I just want to maybe bring up the green there a small little bit. I'm going to push the whites just like that. I'm going to add a bit of saturation just like that. I don't like that blue there, the way it's creeping in. I'm going to put a linear gradient on the top. Again, all just darkening down. I bring out these slightly, might be too dark. So we just put just open the shadow slightly. And remember, because we created a high dynamic range image, we do have all the detail in here. So it is there to be pulled out. Okay. Something I tend to do quite a lot. Sometimes images can go a little bit bluish, so I might leave the blue. But I feel that the blue here is slightly fighting with the green and the yellow, so I want to make that blue less dominant. So I'm going to take down the saturation in the blue, just to take it down, just so it doesn't fight with this area. I don't like that blue there. I might crop that slightly. So just the before and after. So you can see with a few radial gradients and linear gradients that we've managed to draw the eye. I'm going to put another one on the outside, another gradient. I could use a vignette, but I do feel that I can be much more targeted with this kind of made that a bit big there now. Inverse it. Yeah, make it nice and dramatic. Yeah, just take it in. I think one thing I also did do was I just pushed the whites on the church. We go okay with that. Okay. So this is another image, a bit more, obviously much more contrasty. So to add more contrast, I use luminosity masks and the TK9 panel. So this allows me to add contrast to the blacks separately, to the whites separately, and to the midtones. Interestingly enough, I'll close that down and click on it again. This would be it would make a nice black and white image. So that's just giving me like more or less a black and white preview. That's what it would look like with a black and white conversion. So that's all the white selected. So I want to select the darks. So this is the dark side of the tonal range. So number 1 would be all the dark tones. Number 2, I really want to just select the trees down here. So number 2 has less. Number 3, now we're kind of getting to this area. Number 4, right, so that's kind of giving me just the trees, and we're going to hit select there on that, which is there, and we are going to do a curve on just the dark tones. Just lift them up, and you see them lifting slightly, so it allows me to get a bit more detail back in controlled. I don't want to show too much detail. I just want to bring them out of the shadows. Okay, we'll just flatten that. And if you look at the mask, click Alt, just more or less that area that's selected. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to flatten just as I go. There is a flatten one here, flatten button. I'm going to select the midtones. So we have 1, 2, and 3. I go to number 3. and this, I find this works for me. And we'll do a levels on the midtones, so you can see that I can bring the midtones closer to the white point, and usually by doing that you can see the midtone one is, the grey is moving, so we'll move over the white slider, and when I move this back we should get a nice contrast. Tend to leave the black alone because I'm already after bringing out detail in the blacks. So I have basically just added contrast to the midtones, and you can see these are the midtones that are selected. None of the brightest parts or the darkest parts are selected, it's just the midtones, and that gives a nice punch. We'll flatten that, and I might just, I can't see any point in selecting the highlights, but we'll select them anyway. So these are all the highlights. We'll do a levels on the highlights, maybe push them a small bit. Yeah, it's added a bit of oomph, I suppose. And it would be even more now if I brought back this. Just default, maybe a little bit, just leave it at that, and we'll close that down. Before and after, just a little bit of oomph. I'll flatten that. How far off of this will be? Not too far. Darken down the sky again slightly. We'll go back into camera raw. I find it's the easiest way. We'll do a linear gradient. Just bring it down slightly. I'll do 5. And maybe do a radial gradient. Highlights up in the shadows. Another radial gradient. There's no set formula. It's just how you want the image to look yourself. That's it. Better. So yeah, that's it. That's more or less it. How I blended 2 images together, that came from that, and ended up with that. So no plugins, apart from the TK9 panel. No presets. Merge to HDR. Yeah, that's about it. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope it makes sense. When I did look, I guess it's how I'm editing these images. When I look back in this now, I made a mistake with the ISO. I was shooting video as well, and I had the ISO up at 400 for the video. And I forgot to put it back down, but the images are quite usable. So there was numerous things. I should have been shooting at 3.5 for the best aperture on that particular Mavic Pro. My ISO should have been down, and but yeah, still, you know, I got a very usable image. This actually was the day that I lost my drone, so I am quite happy to be even editing this image, because it was stuck 50 feet up on a tree in Lake Blade. So just looking at that one is has slightly more contrast. Yeah, I think what I'll do as well is I'll just just shift the black tones slightly. So I'll just take the blacks up like this, just not to have a deep black point. Pull them down here and up. That's something I like to do, and that's added a little bit more contrast. So yeah, I'll be happy with that. In general, I do like shooting in contrasty light with my own camera. You know, when I'm shooting on a tripod, obviously the drones don't have the dynamic range, so why not bracket and, you know, do a high dynamic range image, process it twice, and you know, dramatic light. Don't be afraid of dramatic light. I really enjoyed making this image. Actually, shooting it, the experience of shooting it alone was just amazing. Just to see the light in the background, the way it was developing, the way the mountains were coming through. It was my first time actually using the drone in Slovenia, and I really enjoyed it. Only to lose the drone about 2 hours later, but I got it back the following morning. So yeah, that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video.